Jake Thompson was getting ready for a typical Christmas season in his cozy suburban home, as he had done for many years. However, everything changed when he encountered a frightened little girl standing at his door, wearing only a thin, tattered dress in the freezing cold of December. There was something in her terrified eyes, and the desperation on her face that made his heart race. What Jake would discover in the hours that followed would shatter his perception of safety and comfort, altering both their lives in ways he could never have imagined. Before we start, let us know where you are, and if you find this profound story touching, don't forget to subscribe for more meaningful stories. On Christmas Eve, Police Captain Jake Mitchell was preparing to spend the holiday alone. His house was decorated simply but warmly with a small Christmas tree, twinkling lights, and a few familiar ornaments. Despite his efforts to create a festive atmosphere, the house remained quiet and somewhat empty, a familiar feeling for a man accustomed to a solitary life. Jake stood by the window, silently watching the lights from other homes in the neighborhood. From there, he could hear the laughter of families gathered together, Christmas music echoing somewhere in the chilly air. He thought to himself that this would be yet another peaceful and somewhat lonely Christmas. Lost in thought, Jake suddenly noticed a small figure standing in front of his door. In the dim light, he saw a little girl, around 8 or 9 years old, in a thin pink dress, her legs trembling in the icy night. She had small, curly hair and cautious eyes, looking like a lost little ghost amidst the holiday atmosphere. What caught Jake's attention was her slightly swollen belly, a sign of hunger or malnutrition. As a police captain, Jake was well aware of his duty, but on this Christmas Eve, the desire to help a wandering child grew even stronger. She stood there, shivering in the cold, and the sight of her made it impossible for him to turn away. Feeling that he had to do something, Jake put on his coat and stepped out of his warm home to find out what she needed. When he stepped outside, he saw her rummaging through the trash can of a nearby house, her tiny hands shaking from the cold as she searched for something edible. While she looked through the garbage, Jake scanned the neighborhood and saw that every house was bright with Christmas lights, decorated with trees, wreaths, and twinkling lights. Inside, families were laughing and enjoying each other's company, with Christmas music echoing from afar, creating a feeling of warmth and happiness. But amidst that scene, the sight of the small girl in her thin dress looked out of place and pitiful, as though she didn't belong in that warm world. Jake noticed a few neighbors had seen her too, but instead of helping, they looked at her with wary and distant eyes. Some even shooed her away, whispering among themselves, sneering about, "Where did that kid come from?" and "Not our concern." Though they didn't say it outright, Jake sensed the hidden malice in their words and their looks. His heart ached to see a child ostracized, especially on Christmas Eve, when everyone was supposed to care and show love. The cold indifference of the people around him only strengthened Jake's resolve. He knew the girl was in a desperate situation, and her appearance tonight was likely no coincidence. In Jake's heart, the Christmas spirit urged him to do something, to give the girl a little warmth and hope on this freezing night. Jake cautiously approached her, keeping a respectful distance so as not to frighten her. He gently leaned down and asked, "Hey, sweetheart, are you all right? Would you like some food?" His voice was warm and soft, trying to reassure her and make her feel safe. However, she immediately looked up at him, her eyes wide with caution. Without a word, she turned and ran, her little bare feet leaving tiny footprints on the thin layer of snow. Jake watched her go, his heart sinking. He could sense the fear in her eyes, as if she was used to being rejected and had to be on guard against everyone. She didn't dare to trust kindness, perhaps because she had been hurt before. Jake felt helpless, but he knew he couldn't just let it go. His instincts as a police officer told him he had to protect her. But on Christmas Eve, the compassion within Jake was even stronger. He didn't want this child to keep wandering in the cold with nowhere to go. Jake decided not to chase after her, fearing that he might only scare her more. He watched her tiny figure as she hurried away, her cold little feet stepping quickly on the snowy ground, like a small bird trying to find a safe haven. He thought quickly about how to approach her without frightening her. An idea came to mind. If she needed food and warmth, he could leave some food on the porch and hope she would come back. Returning to his house, Jake quickly prepared a small bag. He took out some fresh bread, a Christmas cake he had just bought for himself, and a warm bottle of water. Carefully packing it, he gently placed the bag on the doorstep, hoping she would return and take it. The Christmas spirit in him was stronger than ever. Sometimes, a small act of kindness can bring hope to someone. Jake sat by the window, his eyes fixed on the bag as if it were the most precious gift he could give on this Christmas night. He hoped the little girl would feel his kindness, even if she didn't know him and might never fully understand its meaning. The next morning, Jake couldn't stop thinking about the wandering girl from the night before. The image of her bare, small feet, her wary eyes, and her hurried running haunted him. He wondered why a child would have to search through the trash on Christmas night. So as soon as he left the house the next morning, Jake decided to search the area for her. He hoped she was still nearby and that he could find a clue about her situation. After asking around the neighborhood and checking a few places, Jake received information from an acquaintance about an old camper parked near the outskirts, a place often used as shelter by the homeless or those living temporarily. It was a secluded area, far from the center, seen by the neighborhood as a place not for decent people. Jake decided to go check it out. When he approached, he saw an old rickety camper that hadn't been maintained in a long time. The camper was hidden behind piles of garbage and junk, looking abandoned and completely separated from the outside world. The atmosphere there was cold and gloomy, in stark contrast to the brightly lit Christmas neighborhood he had just left. Jake approached and gently knocked on the door. After a few seconds, a woman appeared, her face weary and indifferent. This was Meta, whom Jake would later know as the little girl's mother. Meta had messy hair, a dull, tired gaze. Standing behind Meta was a younger man named Darius, clearly her boyfriend. Both looked at Jake with displeasure, as though his presence was an unwelcome intrusion. "What do you want?" Meta asked, her tone cold and somewhat annoyed. Jake kept his tone calm and gently asked about the little girl he had met the previous night, expressing his willingness to help if their family was in need. However, as soon as he mentioned that the girl had been rummaging through the trash looking for food, Meta immediately became angry and reacted harshly. "My daughter doesn't need anyone's pity," she yelled, her voice full of anger and bitterness. Darius next to her also frowned and muttered something, showing contempt and irritation at Jake for interfering in our family business. Darius, with a raspy voice, mockingly said, "Who do you think you are? Just because you're a cop, you think you can do whatever you want? Don't come here trying to play hero." He also made sarcastic remarks, suggesting that Jake was meddling in other people's business just to show off charity this Christmas. Jake could feel the hostility from both Meta and Darius. He knew that any action he took now could escalate things, making the situation harder to resolve. Still, he couldn't overlook the little girl's circumstances. His sense of duty and compassion told him she was in danger and needed help. Instead of reacting to their harsh words, Jake kept his voice steady. He explained that, as a police officer, he had a responsibility to ensure everyone's safety, especially children. However, Meta just scoffed, a dismissive smirk on her face. Before leaving, Jake left a word of advice. "If you need any help, I'm always ready to assist, especially for your daughter. Please keep her safe and warm this Christmas." But neither Meta nor Darius responded. They simply turned back inside and slammed the camper door. Jake walked away, his heart heavy. He knew that the little girl was likely not only hungry and cold, but also growing up in a hostile environment without care. The sneering words and disdain from her own family made Jake even more concerned. A determination echoed in his mind. He would find a way to help her, no matter the obstacles. The next morning, Jake still couldn't forget the lonely look in the girl's eyes and the cold attitude of Meta and Darius. An unsettling feeling hung over him all day, urging him to do more. So, he returned to the vacant lot where the camper was parked, hoping for another chance to talk with Meta and Darius to understand the situation better. He was prepared for rejection, but his compassion wouldn't let him give up when he thought of the child's plight. When Jake got close to the camper, he saw the little girl sitting outside, her eyes downcast, biting her lip as if she was trying to endure something. He gently called out, "Hello there," but she immediately looked up, startled, before Jake could. Reassure her, Meta stepped out of the camper, her eyes sharp and filled with anger upon seeing him. "What are you doing here again? I told you we don't need your pity," Meta yelled, her voice sour. Darius also stepped out, a bottle in his hand, his face clearly showing displeasure. Look, I don't want any trouble, Jake said, keeping his voice calm. I just want to make sure your daughter has enough food and a warm place to stay. No child should have to endure this cold without proper care. Meta smirked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You cops really know how to meddle in people's business. Who do you think you are, judging our family? Darius sneered, adding, You come here in your police uniform and think you can do whatever you want, right? This is your Christmas, not ours. Don't pretend to be kind. We don't need it. I think Jake looked into their eyes, trying to find a trace of sympathy, but he only saw hostility and disdain. He decided to try one more time. I'm not here to judge or play hero, but she's just a child, and she deserves to be loved and cared for. If you're struggling, there are organizations that support children. I can help arrange some assistance. Meta took a step forward, her eyes blazing with anger. Enough! That's my daughter, and I have the right to decide her life. You have no right to interfere. Darius added mockingly, Why don't you just go home and leave us alone? Don't think that Christmas is a time for you to act like a savior. Jake felt his blood boiling at how Meta and Darius treated the little girl, but he held back. She remained silent behind her mother, her big eyes looking at Jake, with a glimmer of hope but also filled with fear. She didn't dare to speak up, just hid behind her mother, as if she was used to harsh words and a lonely life without protection. Darius, in a challenging tone, rudely shoved Jake's shoulder. Do us a favor and get lost. We don't need the cops' help. If you don't leave, I'll report you for harassing my family. Jake stood firm, looking deep into Darius and Meta's eyes, trying to convey sincerity in his words. I don't want to argue with you both, but if she continues living like this, I'm responsible for intervening to protect her. No one wants to take extreme measures on Christmas, but if necessary, I will. Meta burst out laughing, a mocking, bitter laugh. You think we need your help? Christmas is for those with families, and we're not one of them. This is our business, and we won't let a stranger interfere. With that, Meta pulled the girl inside the camper, and Darius slammed the door shut, blocking any further efforts from Jake. Jake stood there, looking at the closed camper door, filled with disappointment and worry. He knew that if he left, the girl would continue living in neglect, possibly enduring the bitter words of her own family. Though Meta and Darius had shown clear hostility, Jake felt his sense of duty more heavily than ever. He walked away but vowed not to stop here. Back at the police station, Jake discussed the girl's situation with his colleagues, suggesting they consider intervening to protect her. Some colleagues seemed skeptical, advising him not to meddle in family matters and warning that any action might lead to misunderstandings or trouble. However, Jake was adamant that the girl deserved protection and a better life, especially since Christmas had stirred up his compassion. He couldn't ignore it, and he resolved to do everything to get her to a safer place, no matter the obstacles. Back at the police station, the image of the girl in her thin dress haunted Jake. He recalled her fearful eyes and the contempt of Meta and Darius when he offered help. Compassion mixed with anger welled up inside him, and he knew he couldn't ignore it. He had to act even if it could cause trouble. That child shouldn't have to suffer and be left out in the cold while everyone else enjoyed the warmth and joy of Christmas. The next morning, in the police briefing, Jake shared the girl's situation and expressed his concern that she might be neglected or mistreated. He proposed that the police consider intervening to ensure her safety. Some of his colleagues listened, but others were skeptical and even opposed the idea. John, a longtime friend and colleague, was the first to speak. Jake, I get that you want to help that girl, but this is a complicated situation. The family may not cooperate, and if we act without concrete evidence of abuse, we could face accusations of abuse of power. You know the law doesn't allow us to interfere in family matters without clear cause. Jake understood John's concern, but he was filled with urgency. He replied, his voice reflecting his determination, I understand the risks, John, but she shouldn't have to live in such a cold, tense, and lacking environment. I saw her eyes, the fear and sadness in them. I can't just look away when I see a child like that on Christmas night, when we're all safe in the warmth of family. Some other officers began murmuring, showing sympathy for Jake, but also reminding him of legal limitations. Mark, a rather rigid officer, sighed and said, Jake, I get it, but we can't help every kid with a tough situation. It's beyond our capacity. We don't even know their family situation, right? Hearing that, Jake felt a wave of disappointment rising. He realized not everyone had seen what he had seen, and not everyone was willing to stand up for a stranger's child. However, to him, helping her was not just a duty as an officer, but a responsibility of a human being. Jake stood up, looking each colleague in the eye with determination. "I know this is a difficult situation," Jake said, his voice strong and resolute. "But if we turn our backs on this girl, we're ignoring the reason we wear this uniform. I believe that. Protecting vulnerable children who can't defend themselves is what we should do, especially if we can bring her some hope during Christmas." Jake's words gradually softened the hearts of some colleagues. Some younger officers began nodding, expressing agreement. They understood that Christmas was a special time, and if they didn't help her now, there might not be another chance. However, some still objected, arguing that without clear signs of abuse, intervening in family matters could be seen as violating privacy rights. Another officer named Sarah furrowed her brows in thought and said, "Jake, if you really want to help this girl, we could try to find out more about her family situation. You mentioned they live in a camper, so maybe this isn't the first time they have had trouble. We can review old records and reports on Meta and Darius and see if we find any signs." Jake felt a glimmer of hope. He knew that perhaps learning more about Meta and Darius might provide them with evidence to investigate without being seen as unauthorized interference. A group of officers volunteered to help him go through old records, looking for any information on Meta and Darius or signs that the girl might have been in a similar situation before. Through their investigation, they discovered that Meta and Darius had a history of financial instability, even being evicted from rental areas for not paying on time. A previous report noted that some town residents had seen Meta acting aggressively towards other children. These small signs, though not definitive, suggested that the girl was likely living in an unstable and unsafe environment. Seeing the truth slowly emerge, some of Jake's colleagues began to change their stance, agreeing that intervention might be necessary. John, who had previously advised Jake not to interfere, was now more sympathetic. "Maybe you're right, Jake. If she's really in danger, we can't just sit by. After all, we have a duty to protect the younger members of our community." That evening, after his shift, Jake decided to return to Meta and Darius's camper. He prepared a bag with bread, hot food, a coat, and warm shoes for the girl. If he couldn't intervene directly right away, at least he could make sure she had a warmer night in the winter cold. Jake quietly placed the bag outside the camper, hoping the girl would find it. He watched from afar, observing in the dark. A moment later, the camper door opened, and she cautiously stepped out. When she saw the bag, her eyes lit up for a moment, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She opened the bag, looking inside with surprise and joy. Her small hands touched the coat, the shoes, and the food with an indescribable emotion. In that moment, Jake felt a sense of relief. Though he couldn't immediately take her out of her harsh situation, he hoped that this small gift could help her feel a bit of warmth and kindness amidst the winter cold and the hardship of life. He watched her return to the camper, silently promising that he wouldn't give up. Returning home, Jake felt a strong resolve rise within him. He would continue to fight for her, to ensure she had a safer life. This Christmas, he wasn't just fulfilling his duty as a police officer, but embracing the responsibility of being human. And he knew, even though the road ahead would be challenging, he wouldn't back down until the girl was truly safe. That night, Jake couldn't stop thinking about the girl he had met on Christmas Eve. Though he had left a warm bag of supplies and food by the camper door, he still felt uneasy. Would she find it? Would she understand that even as a stranger, someone cared for her in a world so cold and lacking? Sitting by the small fire in his cozy home, Jake felt a heavy weight on his heart, an overwhelming urge. He had to do something, had to find a way to help her. Around midnight, as Jake sat by the window looking outside, a small figure suddenly appeared under the dim streetlights. His heart pounded. It was her. She was wearing the coat he had left, her small feet snug in the shoes he had carefully chosen for her. But her figure still trembled, her little shoulders hunched against the wind, and she looked around with wary, fearful eyes. Jake quietly stood up, stepping outside and watching her. From a distance, she was hesitantly standing by the trash can outside his house, unsure if she should approach. She crouched down, looking around. then quietly began rummaging through the trash with her small, trembling hands. Perhaps it was a familiar action, a habit she had learned to survive. Jake felt a pang of sorrow. He couldn't just watch her in that state. Taking a deep breath, he gently called out, his voice warm and patient. "Hello there. Are you hungry? Would you like to come inside for a while? I have food and warm drinks for you." The girl looked up, her eyes full of caution. She flinched, but this time didn't run away as she had before. Maybe after what Jake had done, she began to trust him a little. She took a few hesitant steps toward him, still watching him warily, but Jake could see a faint hope in her eyes. He smiled and said gently, "It's okay. Come on in. It's warmer inside, and I have hot food waiting for you." Jake walked slowly to the door, making sure not to scare her, and after a moment of hesitation, she decided to follow him inside. As she crossed the threshold, her eyes swept over the warm house, with its small Christmas tree, twinkling lights, and simple decorations. The sight seemed to stun her, as if she had never seen a place this cozy. Jake led her to the kitchen, where he had prepared a hot bowl of soup, some soft bread slices, and a small Christmas cake he had planned to enjoy himself. She sat down, her eyes still filled with caution, but she couldn't hide the joy in her gaze as she looked at the food before her. Jake gently pushed the bowl of soup toward her and said, "Go ahead, eat up, you're safe here." She hesitated for a moment, glancing at Jake as if to make sure he truly meant well. Then cautiously, she picked up the spoon, each spoonful of warm soup passing through her chapped lips. Jake sat across from her, watching quietly, feeling a wave of emotion as he saw her eat quickly but with appreciation, as if each spoonful was a precious gift she had never had before. As she ate, Jake tried to create a friendly atmosphere to help her feel at ease. He started talking gently, his voice warm and sincere. "What's your name? If you don't mind, would you share a little about yourself?" She paused, setting down her spoon, her eyes showing a hint of hesitation. But then she answered in a soft, almost whispered voice, "My name is Maya." Jake smiled gently, feeling as though he had waited a long time for that answer. The name Maya echoed in his mind like a promise, a new beginning, and he knew that from now on, Maya was no longer just a stranger. He gently continued, keeping his voice kind to avoid making her anxious. "Maya, you live with your mom, right? Is there anyone else in your family?" Maya lowered her head, avoiding his eyes, but then she nodded slightly. "I live with my mom and Uncle Darius," Maya said, her voice soft but tinged with deep sadness. "But they don't really care about me." That simple statement, spoken from the mouth of a child, made Jake feel as if his heart was being squeezed. Maya wasn't just a child who needed warmth and food. She was living without the basic love that every child deserves. Jake placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder, feeling how thin and cold she was, and said with all the compassion in his heart, "I'm very glad you came here tonight, Maya. I want you to know that if you need anything, I'm always here." Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and a faint glimmer of hope. Though she didn't speak, Jake could see that she had started to trust him, that perhaps he was the first person in a long time to make her feel safe. When Maya had finished eating, Jake handed her a warm towel and a cup of hot water, telling her to stay warm. He couldn't invite her to stay long, fearing that Mata and Darius might react harshly, but he couldn't let her leave without a promise of support. "Maya, I won't let you go on like this," Jake said, his gaze firm but warm. "Tomorrow, I'll find a way to help you. I'll talk to your mom and Uncle Darius to find the best solution. You deserve a better life." Maya didn't say anything, just nodded slightly, but her eyes sparkled with a small hope, as if she wanted to believe that things would change. Before Maya left, Jake prepared a small bag with some snacks, a few essential items, and a thin blanket to keep her warm. He knew these things might not be much, but for Maya, they could bring a little joy and comfort in her lonely days. As she held the bag, her eyes sparkled, a feeling Jake believed was gratitude, even though she didn't say it. As Maya got up to leave, Jake advised her, "If you need anything, or if you're scared, come to me anytime. I'm always here for you, Maya." She looked at him, her eyes gleaming, and whispered shyly but sincerely, "Thank you so much." Jake stood silently, watching her small figure as she stepped out of his house, heading back to the old camper she called home. The Christmas night quietly resumed, but Jake's heart was full of emotions. He promised himself that Maya's story wouldn't end here. He had given her a bit of hope, and he wouldn't let that hope be extinguished. Tomorrow, he would find a way to ensure Maya received the protection and love she deserved. This Christmas meant more to Jake than just a holiday. It was a promise. He knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, possibly facing opposition from Maya's family, and even the legal system, but he had made up his mind not to give up. Maya had become someone he couldn't forget, and he would do everything to give her a better life. The next morning, Jake woke up with a strong resolve. Images of Maya sitting in his small kitchen last night kept replaying in his mind. Her eyes filled with hope, but also fear. Her small hands gently holding the bowl of hot soup. He knew that she couldn't go on living like this, wandering, hungry, and lacking love. Today, Jake decided to confront Maya's mother and her boyfriend, Darius, to protect her. Jake drove to the campsite with a few colleagues to witness and support him if necessary. They agreed that if there were signs of child neglect or abuse, they would seek help from the child protection team and conduct a formal investigation. When they arrived, Jake saw Meta and Darius outside, leaning against the old camper. They saw the police cars from afar and immediately showed their displeasure. "What the hell is this? Are you here to bother us again?" Darius yelled as he saw Jake and his colleagues approaching. He walked up, his stance aggressive, his face scowling, clearly not wanting any intervention. Jake took a deep breath, trying to keep his tone calm and patient. "I'm here to talk seriously about Maya's situation. She shouldn't have to live in these conditions. As a police officer and someone who cares about the safety of every child in this community, I have a duty to make sure Maya is properly cared for." Meta crossed her arms, smirking, her voice full of defiance. "You people are ridiculous. This is my daughter, and I'll raise her the way I want. No one has the right to interfere." She looked at Jake with cold eyes, trying to assert her complete control over Maya. Jake kept his tone calm but firm. "I understand that Maya is your daughter, but that doesn't mean you can neglect her in such conditions. If you can't take care of her, we can help. She deserves to live in a safe and stable environment, especially since she's so young and vulnerable." Suddenly, Darius took a step forward, his eyes full of challenge and anger. "Listen here, cop. Who do you think you are, judging us? Cops like you always like to interfere in other people's business, pretending to be saints," he sneered, his voice full of contempt. "Christmas means nothing to us. Don't think your Christmas badge will soften us up." Jake tried to remain calm, but deep down, he felt his anger rising at the way they treated Maya. He looked Darius in the eye, his voice now serious. "I'm not here to judge anyone, but a child is living in neglect, without care, and that's unacceptable. If you don't care about her, we'll have to intervene to make sure she's safe." Meta suddenly snapped, her eyes blazing with anger. "I told you, Maya is my daughter, and I'll decide how I raise her. Don't try to interfere." She took a step closer, her voice louder, as if to assert that she was the only one with authority over Maya's life. Maya stood next to her mother, her eyes downcast, her small hands gripping her shirt tightly, clearly afraid to resist. Jake sighed, his heart heavy with sorrow, as he saw the helplessness in the girl. He turned to Meta, his voice gentle but determined. "Maya deserves a better life, one where she's loved and cared for. If you truly love your daughter, you'll let us help and protect her. You can't refuse this out of pride." Meta glared at Jake, her eyes wavering between him and Darius. She seemed to realize that the situation wasn't as simple as she thought. But before she could say anything, Darius placed his hand on her shoulder, shaking his head in disapproval. "We don't need anyone's pity," he muttered, then turned to Jake and Sarah with a hostile glare. "Get out of here now. If you don't, you'll see what real trouble is." Jake held his ground, but he wasn't going to back down easily. A colleague of his, Sarah, stepped forward, standing beside Jake, speaking in a calm but firm tone. "If you two don't cooperate, we'll have to request an investigation into Maya's living conditions. This isn't a threat. It's our responsibility to protect every child in the community." Hearing this, Meta showed a brief moment of worry. However, Darius remained defiant, glaring at Jake and Sarah, then turned and shouted at Maya. "Are you causing me more trouble? I told you not to wander around, you worthless brat!" Darius's harsh words were too much for Jake. He stepped forward, placing his hand protectively on Maya's shoulder. "That's enough, Darius. She's not the cause of your problems. She's just a child who needs care and love." He turned to Meta, his tone now warning. "If you truly care about your daughter, you won't let her live in such neglect and hardship. This isn't how any child deserves to be treated." Meta was at a loss for words, her gaze shifting between Jake and Darius. She seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. But before she could say more, Darius had already lost his temper, yelling, "Get out of here right now! This is my family and no one has the right to interfere." Jake sensed the situation had reached a point where negotiation was impossible. He pulled out his phone, calling for Child Protection Services and reporting Maya's urgent situation. "We need immediate support," he spoke into the phone firmly. "There's a child living in neglect without proper care. Please send a team immediately." While waiting for Child Protection Services to arrive, Jake and his colleagues tried to convince Meta and Darius to allow Maya to receive medical care, but they both refused. Meta turned, her back, muttering angrily, while Darius continued to yell at and blame Maya, treating her as the source of all his troubles. Jake stood between Maya and the two adults, his gaze more determined than ever. When the Child Protection team arrived, Jake and his colleagues briefed them on the situation and provided the information they had gathered. A child protection officer approached Meta and Darius, speaking in a gentle but firm tone. "We will be taking Maya to receive a health checkup and ensure she's properly cared for. This is the child's right, and it's also a way to ensure her safety." Meta protested vehemently, shouting that Maya was her daughter, and no one had the right to take her away. She kept shouting, even trying to pull Maya back, but the child protection officers remained calm and resolute, explaining that they only wanted to ensure Maya's safety. Darius couldn't bear it any longer and tried to lash out, but he was quickly restrained by the officers who kept him at a distance. Maya stood in the middle, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty, but when she looked at Jake, she seemed comforted by his presence. After Maya was taken to a shelter, Jake returned to the police station with a sense of relief mixed with worry. Although he felt satisfied that he had helped her, he couldn't shake his concern for her future. Would Maya truly be well cared for? Would she adjust to the new environment and find joy in life? These questions kept circling in Jake's mind, making him feel restless. In the days that followed, Jake stayed in touch with the child protection team to get updates on Maya's situation. He genuinely wanted to ensure she would be cared for in a safe, loving environment. The shelter volunteers told him that Maya was adjusting well, though she still needed time to overcome the trauma of her past. The staff said she was very intelligent, sensitive, and had a particular interest in drawing. They encouraged Maya to attend art classes to explore and develop her talent. Each passing day, Jake felt a longing for Maya and her future. He decided he needed to do more to support her. A week after Christmas, Jake planned a visit to Maya at the shelter. He brought along a set of paints, a large sketchbook, and a few other small gifts to encourage her creativity. When he arrived, Jake was welcomed by a warm atmosphere where volunteers were caring for the children. They led him to the art room where Maya was sitting, painting. Seeing her, Jake's heart melted. Maya was deeply engrossed in a large painting, her face full of concentration and joy. Every color in the painting blended beautifully, creating a vibrant, lively piece. "Maya!" Jake called out, smiling as he walked in. She looked up, her eyes lighting up when she recognized him. "Did you come to visit me?" "I brought gifts for you," Jake replied, setting down the paints and sketchbook on the table. "I know you love to draw, so I thought these might help you express yourself." Maya eagerly opened the gifts, her eyes gleaming with joy. "Thank you. I'll make so many drawings," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. The sight warmed Jake's heart. He had seen her from the days of wandering in the cold, and now she had found joy and purpose in life. During their visit, Maya shared with Jake about her life at the shelter. She said the volunteers were kind and always encouraged her to participate in art activities. "I've started learning how to paint with watercolors," Maya said in a clear voice. "I love the feeling when the brush touches the paper and when the colors blend together. I feel free when I paint." Jake listened with growing happiness. Seeing Maya find passion and strength within herself made him feel proud. "You're truly talented, Maya. I'm sure your paintings will be beautiful." Jake encouraged her. He could see the light in her eyes when she heard his words. It made her even more determined to pursue her dreams. The afternoon passed in warmth and joy, But Jake also noticed that Maya still needed time to heal from past wounds. Occasionally, she would fall silent, her gaze distant as if processing painful memories. Jake realized that although she was in a better place, her past still haunted her. Before leaving the shelter, Jake knelt down, looking into Maya's eyes. "I'll always be here to support you, Maya. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to call me. I promise not to abandon you." He gently held her hand, feeling the warmth from his sincere words. As he stepped outside, Jake felt his heart filled with hope. He knew that Maya had a fresh start, and that meant a lot. Though challenges lay ahead, she was no longer alone. Jake promised that he would always be there, not just to protect, but to support her on her journey of rediscovery. A month later, Jake continued to visit Maya regularly, becoming a close friend and a role model for her. Each time he visited, he brought small gifts, from new paint sets to books on art, encouraging her to keep creating. Maya gradually became a more confident girl, with beautiful paintings that expressed her inner emotions. As summer approached, Maya began participating in small art exhibitions at the shelter. Jake was always the first to arrive, standing in front with a proud smile. He not only saw the change in Maya, but he also felt a renewal in himself, seeing her shine. Each of her paintings told a story, a dream, and a hope. One afternoon, after a small art exhibit ended, Maya came up to Jake and said, "I want to make a painting for you. This will be the most beautiful thing in my mind." Jake felt touched hearing her words. "I'd be honored to hang that painting in my house. I'm sure it will be a masterpiece." Maya smiled, and it was a radiant smile. She began painting and invited Jake to join her creative process. She showed him her ideas, and together they discussed colors, images, and the meaning of each stroke. It was not only an art activity, but also an opportunity to connect and create beautiful memories. When the painting was finished, Maya stood back and gazed at it with pride. "This is a painting of a family, where everyone loves and cares for each other," she said, her eyes shining as she looked at Jake. "I want a family like that, and I want you to know that you're part of it." Those words moved Jake deeply. He knew Maya had truly opened her heart and started to believe in a brighter future. As summer drew to a close, after a long wait, Maya finally had the chance to see her mother again. Meta had enrolled in a rehabilitation program to improve her situation, and Child Protection Services arranged a supervised meeting between them. Jake was also present to ensure everything went smoothly. Maya stood by, filled with anticipation but also hope. The meeting was tense, yet sincere. After a difficult conversation, Meta expressed remorse and a desire to make amends for her past mistakes. She realized that her love for her daughter was the most important thing, and that Maya needed a safe and stable environment to thrive. Jake observed everything from a distance, knowing that while the road ahead would be challenging, at least Maya had a chance to start again. Finally, when the meeting was over, Maya ran to Jake, her eyes full of emotion. "You know, I feel like I have a new family now." Jake took her hand, feeling the warmth and trust in her words. "Yes, Maya, I'll always be here by your side to support and protect you. This is just the beginning of a new chapter in your life." As night fell, Jake and Maya looked together at the painting she had made, with the shelter lights twinkling like a promise for a brighter future. Jake knew that Maya would no longer be alone in this journey. He would be a part of her life, helping her overcome hardships, pursue dreams, and find happiness within herself. This Christmas didn't just bring a fresh start for Maya, but it also held a promise for the future, that love and support would always be present in the darkest of times. As Jake looked into Maya's eyes, he saw not only a child who had endured so much, but also a symbol of hope and rebirth. He realized that in life, every child deserves a home, a safe place to grow and pursue their dreams. With love, support, and perseverance, what seems impossible can become reality. Life may be full of challenges, but our small actions can make a huge difference. Let's remember that each of us can be a light guiding others. If you love this story and want to see more meaningful messages and acts of kindness, don't forget to subscribe and share Jake and Maya's story. Together, we can spread messages of goodwill to the world. Christmas is not just a holiday. It's an opportunity for us to bring love, hope, and warmth to those who need it most. Let's spread the joy together.